right, everyone. Whew. Sorry, a little bit of a mess up this morning. I forgot to check my level. Thank you very much. All right, let's see how many folks we've got joining us today so far. Drop me a line. Let me know how things are going. Today we're going to be in a movie theater. A little bit different. I actually wanted to put some trailers up until we get a whole bunch of our classmates into the classroom, but I actually wasn't sure if that was really allowed, and if YouTube would get angry at me and then, start taking my site down, which I could not stand right now. So we are on Discord again, so if folks want to join, please drop a line there. Also, I believe that I've fixed the lag issue. So if that's the case, you should hear me clap right now. So please do let me know if that is sounding a lot better than it was last time, because it'll be a lot more fun if actually my mouth matches what I'm actually saying. All right, so oh, sweet. Oh, yes, so clear, all fixed. Yes, I'm so sorry you guys had to put up with that last time. If you can believe it, it was 100 milliseconds off. That was the problem. So, yes, thank you for putting up with all that. I don't know if I would have been able to watch that stream with that kind of stuff like that. All right, so let's get into it today. Yeah, again, if you have any questions, drop a comment in the YouTube comments, or drop something, if you're in the class, drop something in Discord. I see the class list is growing a little bit, which is good, so we'll get things going so we don't take too long. You guys can get through the rest of your day as well. All right, so today we'll talk about sexual selection. Obviously a reference to Tina Turner in that song a little bit, probably an artist you guys aren't very familiar with, so we're just going to pretend that never kind of happened. And today we're talking about sexual selection, which is a subset of natural selection. So we'll talk about what that actually means and why I identified it in that kind of a way. All right, so let's recap what we've actually done in the last class, just to make sure that you guys were kind of listening. Sexy or just like quiet? Make sure everyone can hear me well enough, and then we'll get going. Seems like everyone thinks it's okay. Oh, I see. Maybe I can turn up the levels just a touch, so maybe that turns it up a little bit more. Hopefully you can hear things a bit better. Both. Thank you very much, Carrot Destroyer. I appreciate that. Okay. All right, so good. That's sounding a little bit better. All right, so we're going to recap about what evolution is. So this is where I want you guys to type in again, please, so I can make sure that you guys were paying attention. So evolution is what? What was that one sentence I had at the beginning? Let's see if you guys remember. I don't want to get too far ahead until we really nail this one, because after this I'm going to ask you what those three important things are for evolution to happen. So get ready and start typing right now, so that we can get this going. Yeah, I'll wait a little bit until everyone answers this, because I do really want to make sure that you guys remember what the definition of evolution is and what those three factors that are necessary for evolution to actually occur. Yes, thank you, Megan. A change in allele frequencies. It's that simple, right? So that's what I want you to remember about what evolution actually is. And the next thing I want you to tell me is, what are those three factors that are really important in determining, or in making sure that evolution does actually occur? Frequencies over time. So very good. Excellent. Glucose, thank you very much. Variation, selection, and heritability. Exactly in the order that I talked about it on Tuesday, and exactly in the order I have it in the slides. So remember, we need variation in a trait, in any trait, whether that's a behavior, whether that's height, size, weight, horn length, whatever that is. There has to be variation in that trait there has to be selection acting on that trait in the sense that some individuals have to be doing better than others. These individuals are doing better than these guys because of the possession of that trait. And then that trait, to some extent, has to be heritable. Okay? So those are those three things that we're talking about last week. Oops. So well done there, everyone. Now, we talked about this, and I implicitly, I did kind of imply something that's happening throughout this. There's these individuals, some individuals get selected, and there's a push into the next generation of those genes. And the one thing that's really important for all this to kind of happen is there have to be offspring. Like, you have to have kids to carry on those genes, and those genes that are passed on to the next generation, and so on and so forth. So, making sure you find a mate and reproducing is fundamentally important so you can pass your genes on. So now we're going to be talking about, sexual selection, males and females interacting with one another, producing offspring, and what that really means, and why, things vary as a consequence of densities of males and females within a population. So I'm going to ask you guys now, what do all these images have in common? So that's a really broad question, so I'll narrow it down, but you guys start throwing out ideas of what's similar between all four of these individuals and images. And what I want you to think about who's being shown, what's being shown, why it's being shown, any of these different things that might be similar between individuals. Yes, Garrett, sorry, absolutely. They are all males showing off in some kind of a way. So the question is, why are they showing off? And the answer is sexual selection. So let's define what sexual selection is at this point. So we know that evolution is a change in allele frequencies. We know that natural selection was some kind of environmental factor, whether abiotic or biotic, that affects the reproductive rates of individuals. So what do you guys think sexual selection is? So absolutely, well done, Jillian, Sram, and Scuba Tim. They're all mating displays. They're all males showing different traits. 2 females. And Ketty, absolutely. Males have sexually selected traits that help them get females. So this get females part that you mentioned, I want to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that. So how do you think males can kind of get or attract females by having these kinds of traits? So let's think about that a little bit, and you guys try and answer, give me some ideas of why you think that may be the case and what's going on. But Ketty, you're absolutely right in the sense that sexual selection specifically deals with the opportunity that individuals have to mate. So it's the ability to find a mate, the ability to successfully attract a mate, and to mate with one another and produce offspring. So that whole process falls under the umbrella of sexual selection. Yes, I do love it. This sexual selection is what I started, exploring during my PhD. Well, actually, no, during my honors thesis when I was back in Canada, and something that's kind of passed through all my research and still is a fundamental part of all the research that I actually do. And we can get a little bit into that a little bit later. So absolutely, Chapo, females do select males on a bunch of traits. But if we think about the females who are selecting males, and if we think about these males that are actually displaying to females, like I mentioned before, not all males are going to be equally successful because of the traits that they possess. So what I want you guys to think about is what are some of the factors that could actually influence how that could determine whether a male or female finds someone of the opposite sex. Okay? So that's kind of there's one fundamental thing that's really, really important for males and females to be able to reproduce. And that is, there's a few people typing. So fitness, fitness is the number of offspring that you've produced, okay? So fitness in evolutionary sense, obviously the way we use fitness is very different in saying someone's buff and, has good musculature. In evolutionary concepts, the concept fitness means how many offspring you leave behind. And absolutely, Scuba Tim, it is the ability of individuals to find each other. So that is going to be the most important thing. Because if you can't find a mate, well, then there's no way that you're going to mate, right? So I'm going to show you an image of a bar. And now you guys tell me what's kind of unique about this situation in this bar. There's probably a bunch of you who kind of picked it up right away. I just realized I didn't give myself a glass of water today, so I wonder how parched I'm going to become. Yes, so this bar, unlike any bar I've ever been to in my entire life, is full of just women. So if you were a heterosexual male looking for a mate, this may be a really good place to go. Except this is actually an image of a lesbian bar, right? So these females are unlikely to be attracted to an individual like myself because that's not what they're looking for in a partner. So images can be a little bit deceiving sometimes. But all these factors, in the human world at least, play in the opportunity to mate. So let's go to a regular bar. What most people have kind of experienced, what was pretty much the experience I had through my undergraduate and graduate career, is each blue dot is a male and each pink dot is a female. And this is often what the sex ratio kind of can look like in a typical kind of bar. If we look in here, we could probably start naming some traits or some features or some phenotypes that may lead to some individuals being more successful in finding a female. So I'm specifically going to be talking about males here for a second, because if you think about it from the opposite perspective, females have a lot of choice. Their difficulty won't be in finding a mate, their difficulty will be in finding the right mate, or the right mate for them, right? So what could we imagine some of the traits that males in this population, in this example, could possess to be able to successfully, attract a mate? So I'll let you guys throw out some ideas. This is always a little bit of fun, and it's meant to just be a bit of fun because exploring it in this kind of a way kind of sets up the rest of the lecture where we can explore it in non-human animals. But I kind of want you guys to be able to chat about it a little bit, to think about what traits in humans may be associated with success. And absolutely, fashion sense, a fetching hat guy. Yes, where is that guy? Yes, I wonder if that guy is going to be successful, but maybe that falls into either good or bad fashion sense in that variation. We've got smell, absolutely. We've got attractiveness, so in that sense, I'm going to take that to mean facial features or musculature or physique and things like that may result in some individuals being more attractive. Humor and holding a conversation, absolutely, right? You can even go even further than this. That first line that you say to a girl, have the confidence potentially, not being too aggressive when you're trying to talk to somebody. So you can imagine there's hundreds and hundreds of potential traits that could lead to some males having more success in this environment than others. And that really sets up sexual selection and that opportunity to mate. So now let's shift into the non-human animal world and we'll talk about these guys. So this is red deer. That was my son coming in again. Hey buddy, what's up? So we'll talk about red deer here. So here is a male and here is a female. And you see a massive difference between the two. I want you guys to suggest why these differences may actually exist. All right? So That female is smaller than that male. She's lying down. She's not displaying. She doesn't have antlers. That male on the other end is much bigger. Look at the size of his neck. Look at those horns. Yes, I see we're still going through a few traits. So this could be a list of some guys who are actually looking to do better in the bars. So absolutely. So glucose, he hit it right on the head here. In this sense, what we're showing really, really nicely in this species is that males have this weaponry. They have this difference in physique, in body structure, that will allow them to successfully compete against other males. Okay? And in this sense, that means they will be able to keep their females away from other males. And this is what these competitions look like. So now I bet right away you guys can start imagining some traits that could lead to increased success in a combat like this. You could see the size of the horns, a male's weight, how much energy he has, how quick and responsive he is, how intimidating he looks. All these factors that could determine how well a male is able to compete with another male over the access to females. So, and absolutely, so SRAM, they invest energy in different parts, not of selection, but in different parts of traits, because the traits are the things that are under selection and respond to selection because they're heritable. And they're heritable, because they're heritable, they have some genes behind them, and those genes may signal quality in some sense. Very good, Scuba 10. And we're going to get back into that concept of genetic quality a little bit. In I think the next slide and in a few slides. So what I want to show you is just a little bit of data. So on the top on top is survival rate for what's in different columns: juvenile males, adult males, and really old senior males, which is not old like in human age, but old nonetheless. And then on the bottom, we've got the number of offspring individuals produce. So this bottom one is going to be their fitness, okay? The number of offspring they've produced. So we'll look at the survival rate of juveniles as a consequence of antler length, okay? And if we look here, young adults have a really low survival down here, but as they get older, and as they grow horns, they start surviving a little bit more. And this is likely because in the early stages, there's a lot of selection on just being able to grow up and survive in this kind of an environment. And once you're big enough, you start growing horns, and you're a big enough size that you end up surviving really, really well. And that turning point is somewhere here around 20 centimeters. So in adults, all males have antlers. And what we see is almost a kind of linear effect of survival and horn length. So as long as you have horns about this size, you're pretty big, you can survive, you can find food, you can do well, just as well as individuals who have bigger horns. Once you get really old, now horns are kind of bad. They're heavy, it's really expensive to maintain all the musculature to hold your head up. It's so much more energetically costly to walk around and lug these huge weapons around. And because you're using more energy, you don't survive as well, and you either die of natural causes or you get picked off by predators. So you can see, in this sense, horns are a signal of individuals being able to survive, especially when you're in a reproductive stage and when you're not too old. Now let's look at fitness, and this is the important bit, right? Because this determines how well individuals do in the evolutionary lottery, in the sense of how many offspring they end up producing. So young adults who are just at reproductive, you can imagine producing many offspring, not as many as those guys who have bigger horns. If we look at adults, that's even steeper. So the individuals with really big horns are having more offspring, almost 3, while the individuals at the lower end are having 1.5 offspring when they have smaller horns. And then we have the same kind of thing happening in seniors. So even though there's this huge cost, I can't reach all the way over there, huge cost of being a senior, and that you don't survive when you have big antlers, you have a lot of offspring. And that's a good thing because your genes survive to the next generation. So, what are these horns signaling? This is what I want you to tell me. When you saw all those images there, what kind of information could a female gain from looking at a male's horns? All right. This is what I want. So throw out a couple ideas, either in the YouTube comments or in Discord, some information that females can gain from these horns that males possess and show off and use for competitions. So throw out any ideas, we'll talk about them a little bit, and then we'll go on to some further examples as well. I know there's a little bit of a lag, so sometimes it's a bit tough, but I think several people are typing. That's what I want to see. Bigger horn means greater fitness. Yes, they do, but why do they mean? So females want to mate with these males that have bigger horns because those horns signal something, and that leads to increased fitness. There's a big and a strong man. That's right. They're able to compete with others. Very good. So those horns are associated with fitness because those horns signal the ability to compete, the large size, the ability to survive in an environment where maybe it's hard to find that next meal, right? So that's what females are using as a cue to select males in this kind of an instance. Absolutely, Scuba Tim. So hold a greater domain and better protection of offspring. That could also play as well if the males actually do end up taking care of offspring. That's something we're going to end up talking about near the end of this lecture. So it's great that you brought that in. And Keddy, you as well. Protecting young, absolutely, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and the fact that they have more resources and they can access more resources. So that's absolutely true. So I see there's just a few people who keep on kind of interacting. I want to get the whole class going. There's 20 of you this time, right now. So folks, jump in. This is a chance to, it's all anonymous, so I don't know who everyone is, so you can have a little bit of fun. And absolutely, deterrence of young bucks. So these bigger guys can outcompete these small guys who don't get the chance to get to females. Absolutely. So they signal things like competitive ability to acquire resources, and this idea of good genes. That I have genes that allow me to survive because look at my genes that help me produce these big horns, and I can find all the food that I need to produce all these huge horns and fight off all these males. Aren't I an attractive guy? Always fight. So this is a species of jumping spider that I worked on during my PhD, and I love these guys. So we put these guys in the same arena, and you can see that these two guys. One of these guys is showing off and making a display, and the other guy, you can see he's kind of making himself look bigger, kind of flexing his legs, and they are signaling to one another in a contest, because what they do is they fight over female vials. You can see this hibernaculum at the top is where a female is, and these guys are fighting over access to her. And you can see they take turns in displaying towards one another and trying to figure out who's better, who's stronger. So one's backing up, one's winning, one's going forward. And you actually hear a little bit of the vibrations. And they fight, and one individual wins. So the first individual who was actually backing up was that individual who was actually winning. So in this case, males were displaying towards one another. They were vibrating towards one another at the same time. I'll get to your question, Lulu, in a second. And they were trying to determine who was stronger and who should have access to that female. And in this case, that fight got, that fight got so intense that males actually ended up interacting with one another physically. And that's really, really rare in nature because that's really costly. Because not only are you wasting a lot of energy, you could get damaged and could be hurt during the contest, and you also are making yourself really visible to potential predators. So there's huge cost to these kinds of behaviors, which means that the benefits of having access to that female must be high enough that males want to do this. So this is one type of sexual selection where males have, this example and the red deer example is intrasexual competition, where males are competing against one another to get access to females. Okay? So that's one type of sexual selection. So let's look at this now. This is going to be a second example. So I want you guys to tell me, why do you think this crazy long tail exists? And you know, how and why it looks ridiculous, and males have a really hard time flying. And while you guys are writing those answers, I'll answer Lulu's question. So do the horns represent sexual maturity? Absolutely. So males who are juvenile and who are yet to be sexually mature don't have those horns. And in that kind of a sense, that's a good thing, because the adult males don't want to fight them, and they're not wasting resources and potentially hurting themselves in those contests with males. So they only grow those horns when they are sexually mature. And that's very common in a lot of different animals where they have some kind of a weaponry or some kind of a signal. So we'll wait for these comments to come in. So why does this crazy long tail on this bird exist? And we're going to go through one of these fundamental experiments that, you know, kind of set up the stage for sexual selection early on in, you know, evolutionary research. So longer tails may aid in mating displays. Yep, absolutely. They have to impress the female and make an impressive display or mating performance. Absolutely, Jillian. So that one's a little bit more on target there, in the sense that this is a signal specifically to females. Males aren't using this to compete like the red deer are. They're using this to signal to females. And absolutely, Ketty, they're to show that they can maintain this trait and are healthy, right? So this is a different type of signal. So those are really, really good hypotheses. So now what I want to go through is an experiment where we want to test whether your hypotheses are actually true. Are this long tail, is it a signal that females use to choose males? So what I want you to think about is, oh no, I already gave you the answer. That one slide's missing. Okay, now, all right, we see that these are the 4 treatments that we would end up using. I was going to make you guys tell me those 4 treatments, but you win this time. So we'll collect and catch a whole bunch of males. And in some of those males, we will not change their tail size. We're going to leave it the exact same way that they are. Some of those males, we will give them shorter tails. So we'll cut off the tail, and they have a shorter tail. And we'll see what happens to these males. We'll take that tail that we've cut off, and we will add it to other males to make their tails longer. All right? And then, of course, in this situation, because we're doing a manipulation, we need to have a control. And that control is, we take a bunch of males, we cut their tails, and then we glue them back on. Because, of course, we want to make sure that that manipulation, that cutting, isn't the thing that's affecting males. Because you can imagine that if you cut a male's tail, male may become really, really stressed, and it's that act of cutting that may be resulting in males with shorter tails having lower reproductive success, not necessarily the fact that they have shorter tails. Right? So this is the reason why we need that, need to be able to have some kind of a control there. So now, if we know that these, okay, see, this is the slide that was supposed to come up, so yeah, way to go me. All right, so if we know that males who have unmanipulated tails of some length have an average of have longer tails. So throw it out there. Let me know what you think would happen if males have longer tails. So throw that out, and I'll wait for you guys to let me know what you think. They should have more mates. Absolutely, Sram. So, and that's, okay, the control. I forgot what order this happened. So controls have the same, and you're right. When you have a longer tail, males end up attracting more females. Have almost 2 nests per male. So that means some males have 3, some males may have 1, and that means they have more offspring. So, and that's exactly it. they have more nests and are more successful, and as a consequence have more fitness, or have a greater fitness. What do we expect to happen for individuals that have artificially shortened tails? Now I want you to answer that question. That should be just as simple, and I know you guys are going to nail it, but I'm going to let you tell me what it is anyway, because that's what learning is all about. They'll have very few nests, and thank you, it's Daphne, lower fitness. Excellent use of evolutionary terms there. That's exactly what's happening. So individuals, on average, have half a nest. And what does that mean? Well, some individuals may attract a female, and some individuals attract no females, right? So now we can conclude from this data that individuals with longer tails have greater fitness, and because those tails are attractive to females. They signal something to females. So what do those things signal? That same kind of thing that you guys mentioned earlier. The ability to survive, the ability to acquire resources to make a huge tail, the ability potentially to defend against parasites, because you have more feathers, you're going to probably have more parasites that are attracted to you and land on you. And they signal to some extent your genes, your ability to find food, stay away from predators that are actually stored in your genes and passed on to your offspring. So my question to you is then, if this tail is so great, why don't individuals evolve a super long tail? Why doesn't everybody have a really long tail? Because then everybody could do better, and that tail should keep growing bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And males should have increased fitness. So why don't we see this kind of thing continuing to evolve? This longer tail continuing to evolve? You know, even though it may be costly to make this tail, it's still very, very beneficial, because obviously females like it and they have a greater fitness. And you're right, there's a very high energy cost that likely decreases survivability glucose. Very good. And Tim, they needed to fly. Absolutely. So there's going to be some limitation there just from physics, because you have a heavy, long tail, it's going to be harder to drag and you won't be able to get off the ground. And that's going to be difficult to avoid prey, and that's this balancing act. That's exactly right, Chapo, and exactly right, Jillian. So that's where natural selection is balancing sexual selection. And that's why it's important to understand that all this is happening at the same time. It's not just that natural selection happens here and then sexual selection happens there, and sometimes one happens there. This is all happening simultaneously, and all these things balance each other out. That's really, really important to remember. All right. So exactly, the cost of developing the traits outweigh the benefit, which is exactly what you guys had in the comments, which is wonderful. So here I'm going to show you a bunch of Habernatus spiders. These are some jumping spiders that are in North America, all throughout North America, but a lot of these species are going to be from the Arizona area. And these are vibrations that individuals are making and dances. So it's really, really awesome. You can see how intricate they can become. These guys using his first pair of legs and his third pair of legs. They're using their pedipalps, they're dancing, they're singing. You can hear that, and it's all really well choreographed. And you can see the colors on the underside of their legs. You can see those third legs moving in the back there. And they have different vibrations that they're producing with each one of these kinds of courtship dances. So I want you guys to tell me what you guys think when you see stuff like this. Oh, we've got to come in here. Link to I don't want to post a link to the Discord and the YouTube channel because I want to keep that for folks, but it's in the forum in Moodle, so you can grab it from there. So you can see how intricate these kinds of behaviors are, which is super, super awesome. And then you can see now near the end of courtship, of course, this female isn't alive. I know it's hard to get these guys recording something with live females because females eat them sometimes. And we'll get into that. But you can see, and that last guy did that really, really fast kind of mating. Courtship, mate, and that's it. So you can see the massive amount of variation of what's going on in these populations. And that's really, really interesting to study from a sexual selection perspective, because you can imagine that female preferences have led to the evolution of all these traits. And this is why my friend Damien Elias works on these animals, to explore how these signals have evolved, how female preferences have led to the evolution of these different traits, and how it's led to the evolution of this complexity in traits. Because you saw all the vibrations, or you heard the vibrations that males made, and you saw how those are coordinated with specific movements that males are showing. So these males are actually, they have two body parts, their head and their cephalothorax. In between there, they actually have a comb, like crickets do, or similar to what crickets have, and they move their abdomen up and down. And it's that movement up and down that's creating those vibrations. And by changing the rate of that movement and the timing of that, they can produce different vibrations that move throughout their legs, move through the surface, and are picked up by females. So females are using both this visual cue of males dancing and that auditory, or in this sense tactile cue, that males are sending through vibrations in the ground, and actually vibrations in the air as well. So absolutely, it is some form of interpretive dance, which is really, really cool. So I love these animals, and they're a really neat comparison to what's happening in Australia with the peacock spiders. That's why Damien and I work on both of those, on the peacock spiders together, with him working on these animals. But I want to pick out two species that I want to focus on here. So in Arizona, there are a bunch of sky islands. And what I mean by sky islands, and they're the tops of mountains. And males live, through evolutionary time, males have moved and lived in all the valleys, and now it's gotten too warm in some of these valleys, and males only live on the tops. So now they're separated from one another, and this has allowed female choice or sexual selection to result in the evolution of all kinds of different traits. So all these four males, even though the top two and the bottom two look really similar, they're found on very, very different islands. I'm going to focus on these two bottom ones because they're really cool. One called Hibernatus adicosa, and another one found in Santa Rita. So adicosa males have more complex songs and contain novel song components. Santa Rita males are simpler, and they don't sing as complex of a song towards females, and they don't have as complex dances. So what Damien ended up doing is you can actually put a little piece of glue, temporary glue, in between a male's abdomen, or it's actually wax, in between a male's head and abdomen, and what happens is you can stop a male from being able to make those vibrations. So you can grab a bunch of Santa Rita males, the males who are simple, and you can grab a bunch of adicosa males, males who are more complex, and you can silence them by putting a little piece of wax in there. The males are really complex, Santa Rita males are really simple. Should we see the same effect of muting males, of preventing them from making those vibrations? Should we see the same effect on a female's choice or a female's likelihood to mate with that male? So let's see. So Swami said relies completely on visual cues. That's exactly what would end up happening. So if we silence them, females only have visual cues to use to select a mate. Right? So SR males would have higher fitness than adicosa males. Do you mean, Glucose, when they're muted? I'm going to assume that you mean yes. So we can actually, so this is the experiment that Damien did. He's muted males in black, and he's kept the males in white, he's just put a wax on their head. So he's kept wax on there, but he hasn't stopped them from calling. So, and Chapo thinks there's going to be a greater effect on Atacosa males and reduced fitness for both, but a greater effect on Atacosa. That's a very good hypothesis. So let's see. So we do see an effect on both, on Santa Rita, where muted males are doing a little bit more poorly, not quite as bad, but a little bit more poorly. And that effect is absolutely huge in Atacosa. So females in Atacosa, like you guys predicted, are relying both on visual and acoustic cues, while females in Santa Rita are happy enough just using visual cues, and the loss of that other signal isn't that big of a deal. So now you can imagine selection affecting fitness in these populations, in these species, very, very differently. And that's because if an environment reduces a male's likelihood to be able to transmit these vibrations, the song, then males will do much more poorly. So you can imagine strong selection for males to be able to find the right habitat to signal in and to be able to do so really, really well. While that selection is much weaker here because there's not as much of a difference, and that song isn't as important. So now you can start seeing how the environment and female preference could potentially interplay. So once again, we have this idea of sexual selection interacting with natural selection to be able to result on, to affect the strength of selection males are experiencing when trying to impress females. Right? So I hope that kind of makes sense to everybody so far. So drop some comments if it doesn't. Yeah, so drop some comments if it doesn't make sense. I can explain things a little bit better, but hopefully you guys are following along on this, and this all kind of makes sense in the grand scheme of things. So I'll take, okay, we've got some folks typing, so in the meantime, while we're waiting for the folks to type these comments in, we just talked about what's going on with males for the vast majority of this lecture so far, because these guys are always bright and shiny and big and strong and have all these weird traits. But it's important also to look at what's going on with females. So what I want you guys to have a little bit of think about, what's happening to females of this species, and what kind of selection may be affecting how these females behave or look, or the phenotypes of females. So have a think about that. Throw in some comments of what you think may be happening and what selection may be acting on females. I'll take a look at these comments and start answering some stuff about what I've talked about with the Hibernatus. So Marcus says, does the Atacosa environment favor vibration production, or is it purely due to the female's preferences? And that's a really good question, right? Because I implied, or I suggested, that the environment could have an effect. And to be honest, I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Damien. But it's something that we could imagine, right? And that's something that we could explore. Now, Damien has done a lot of experiments that do show that when males court on rocks, for example, males don't do as well. And that's because the rocks dampen those vibrations and they don't reach the females. So it's almost as if males are self-muting themselves. They do much more poorly when they court on rocks compared to when they court on leaves, for example. Leaves are a really, really good transmitter of vibrations. So those males have much more success. So it is possible that the habitats do vary enough in those different environments that could have resulted in the evolution of females not caring as much about vibrations. And Damien has done some really neat experiments where he's actually used Santa Rita females, the females who are fine without vibrations, and provided them with Atacosa males, the ones who do have vibrations and more complex songs. And he's actually shown that those females do actually prefer Atacosa males to their own Santa Rita males. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening in there. So for some reason, there's a limitation to what's evolving in Santa Rita, potentially because of the habitat. That was a really long-winded explanation, but I hope that kind of makes sense and explains, how complex all this stuff can be, and also how interesting it is to really tease some of these things apart in a whole bunch of different animals. So I'll keep it going, and I didn't see any comments about what's happening to these females, so I'm a little bit disappointed, I'll be honest. I was hoping that you guys would come up with some ideas of what's going on with females and why females essentially look like this. So these are the females of those same males, and they are brown, drab in color, they're smaller, they aren't as loud, and absolutely, Lulu, they are likely putting more energy into reproduction, because reproduction is so costly. And absolutely, Glucose, you got the same idea as well. Females are plain as resources are invested into offspring rearing. And that's it. So females don't have to attract males in the same kind of way, so they don't need to be showing off like males do. That being said, in some species where we have sex role reversal, males are the choosy ones and females are the ones showing off. So that does happen in some species, which is really, really cool and allows us to explore questions about why certain traits evolve. But in the vast majority, you're right, the females are drab, and they're not trying to impress anyone. And that's exactly right. And they are trying to save their resources and trying to blend into the environment so they don't die. Exactly, Tim and Marcus. So well done. So these are all these females that are looking a little bit more drab. So what I want to do now is take a kind of a look at what's the ideal circumstance for each sex. So here is kind of a continuous distribution of what could be offered by a partner, by a male, specifically in this sense. Males can be the only ones taking care of offspring. They could take care of offspring with females. They could just provide territories for females. They could just give females some kind of an energy resource to help them produce offspring, or they could just give them their genes. This is what males could potentially provide to females. So what do you think males want to do in this situation? And what do you think females want males to do in this situation? That's what I want you guys to answer. So I'm going to wait here until you guys do, because this is a super fundamental concept in sexual selection that in reality was only kind of really started being explored, not even 2 decades ago. So relatively new concept, but fundamentally important. And we understand now just how much this difference between what males and females want has shaped, all kinds of interactions between males and females in all kinds of species, including humans. So absolutely. So Sram, they each want whatever expends less energy for themselves. That's fundamentally it. Absolutely. They both want to reproduce, run. They just want to give them the sperm and just go, because anything more prevents them from finding potentially more mates. So absolutely, Tim and Ro and Chapo, very well done. That's exactly what's happening. Males want to just find a female, give them sperm, pass on their genes, and go on and find another female to do the same with. And there's certainly species where that is the case. In some other cases, females would love it if males took care of all the offspring. And there are some animals where males do that, but it's a lot more rare than males only giving sperm. But these are all options, and some of the factors that affect this are the environment, levels of predation, the ability to find mates, both for males and females. So this whole concept, this idea of that what males and females want from one another is called sexual conflict. Nice abalone, homie. I won't say that online. I'll just leave that into the discussion. This concept of sexual conflict, this idea that males and females want something different, is super, super important. And like I said, it's only really discovered very recently, or really, I mean, not really discovered, but really formalized relatively recently. And we can see, and it's really shown really nicely in water striders. These are the front pair of legs of females as they grow through different instars. These are the front pair of legs in males. Similar in first, second, and third instar. And in the fourth instar, males, they change their front forelegs really, really drastically. And this allows them to grasp females when they get on top of them like this and prevents them from getting kicked off. What I haven't shown here, unfortunately, you can also see the difference in shape of the legs and the back legs for males, which also helps them to grasp. Females don't evolve any kind of traits on their legs or on the front or back legs. They grow this kind of spike on the back of their abdomen that prevents males from being able to, don't necessarily need to be just a physical phenotype. They could also be behavioral. So this is a really neat example from a colleague of mine, Chuck Khan, who was a PhD student in our lab at UNSW, who did his PhD with Rob Brooks. And he's done some awesome experiments looking at levels of sexual conflict. So obviously, male and female water striders aren't alone in their environment. And what happens is males try and find a female, they jump on a female, and they try and mate with a female. Female, on the other hand, struggles, and they want to kick this male off, and they don't want a male to mate with them. Unfortunately, in an environment, they have predators that live underwater. And these predators specifically wait and feel vibrations on the water surface. So these males come along, they find a female, and the female tries to shake them off. Sometimes they do so, but in an environment where there's a lot of predators, they tend to be more complicit, to not shake off males as much because it's a threat. The neat kind of thing is if the female tries to kick this male off, what the male ends up doing is tapping the water surface and trying to attract a predator. Now you can kind of imagine what that does, and I want you guys to throw some ideas in the comments there again, is what do you think that male's trying to do by tapping the water surface while trying to mate with that female? Remember, there's predators there, so there are things that are going to be going on. So again, it's a little bit of an interplay between sexual selection, natural selection. So yes, Lulu, he's trying to subdue the female, but he's already kind of done that with his claws and his back legs. He's trying to attract predators to threaten the female to limit her resistance. Really well done, Glucose. That's exactly what that male is doing. So he's using his environment and the threat of a predator to be able to increase his likelihood to transfer sperm to the female, because he knows that she's going to be struggling less when he does this because she's the first individual eaten because she's under him. Yes, female water strider rights, hashtag 2020. Totally agree. So you can see how vicious sexual selection could be. And this is a similar kinds of thing that's not as vicious in Drosophila, but males actually produce different compounds within their ejaculate that they transfer to females that make females want to produce more eggs. So even at their own cost, and they make females less attracted to other males. So they've evolved all these compounds that manipulate female behavior. Now you can imagine, through sexual conflict, females don't want to be manipulated. So you can imagine strong selection for alleles that lead to females being able to fight that genetic manipulation. So that's a huge kind of area of study in Drosophila, and it actually happens in a lot of different animals as well. Then we've got this crazy example with bed bugs, where males have gone so far to avoid a female's reproductive tract. And what they do is they stab a female. Oops, the image is not coming out. They stab a female outside of a reproductive tract and just kind of transfer sperm into the female's body, and the sperm find their way to the egg. So males are trying to circumvent any kind of female reproductive ability and a female's ability to control sperm by just getting the sperm into a female system and letting the sperm kind of take over. So you can imagine, and you know, these are actual real things. You can see how crazy evolution trying to take advantage of each other and protect themselves against, you know, males or females who are trying to take advantage of them. So this whole field of sexual conflict is really cool. So we're coming to the end of things, so I'll finish things up by saying rarely do interests align between the sexes, and that's including humans. So, you know, what I want you guys to think about after we get off this, and you can throw the comments in, I'll keep answering the comments in the Discord channel, is, you know, this happens in humans as well. So it's really interesting to kind of explore how males and females in humans kind of compete against one another, how they try and take advantage of one another, how they're fighting those things, and how, you know, how our human social environment has changed how males and females kind of interact. And that's a lot of what my research explores and our lab's research explores at UNSW. So I'm going to leave things there, and I'm going to say goodbye to everyone for now. If you want to keep going, I will answer questions you can ask. And the last thing I will say is on Monday we will be doing we got to about 6 So I'll just send an email about us playing Xenon Pro on Monday. We'll talk a little bit of data and answer some questions. That'll be your last few sessions. So I'm going to say goodbye to everyone today. See you all later, and hope you guys have a great day. Cheers.